we talked about how big it was for Clemson to return those guys, but now we actually have numbers to back it up. In Bill Connolly's returning production metric that he does for ESPN, Clemson is number one, as you can see on the screen, number one in the country in returning production, number one on offense, I believe number 7 on defense. That is, I can't tell you how much that is important. I know some people kind of roll their eyes because returning production is something that's talked about a lot every season with a lot of teams, and some of the teams that are number one on that list don't end up being good. I think Virginia Tech was number one last year, and how many games did they win? 6. Like, so it's a very case by case thing. But one thing that I think is important when you're talking about a program like that recruits at the level of Clemson, I think it's magnified because Virginia Tech doesn't have a roster full of 4 and 5 stars.
Right.
Clemson is a team that is a roster full of 4 and 5 stars, and you don't get many as a program like that that is going to more than likely send guys to the league every year. You're not typically going to be able to return enough to be in the tops at that metrics, because just by the natural notion of having the more talented players, they're going to be leaving school early to the draft, and you're going to have more guys transfer out too. Just that's the nature, because guys are sitting behind other stars, and maybe they want to go play somewhere else. So all of that is factored in, and the fact that Clemson is number one, I think it accentuates how important this season is, because you're not going to get this level of buy-in every single year, or and guys coming back every single year. This is a very, very unique opportunity. Even with a program like Ohio State, who won the national championship, they had they had a lot of guys come back, but they were not number one in returning production. I think they were maybe in the top 20-ish. Because they had guys go to the draft. That's just the nature of it. But Clemson, they had guys. They did have guys go to the draft, but wasn't to the level that you're replacing a significant portion of either side of the ball. And so that's a really unique opportunity. And you got some guys that could have left to the draft to come back. So I think, especially when you look at the number one returning production on offense, I think that speaks to everything about what the capability of this team is. Having a potential Heisman candidate at quarterback, returning all of your wide receivers, and also adding one that was productive at the FCS level. It speaks a ton. You're returning all but one of your offensive linemen, your starting offensive lineman. That speaks a ton. Yeah. It just, and I can't emphasize it anymore. This kind of thing kind of illustrates what we're talking about when we say that this is really a make or break year for Clemson. I'm always hesitant to be like championship or bust, and I know you agree, but if there's a year to do it, I mean, you're not going to get many opportunities like this.
Yeah, and I mean, look, and first and foremost, shout out to Bill Connolly and the article over on ESPN where he published not just the top 20. He went 1 through 139, I think is or 137 is how many FBS schools there are now. So he ranked them 1 to 137. Talked about in his article a little bit about how he goes about it. Balancing both the returning production plus in the new transfer portal, you have to factor in that kind of stuff. So, but when you look at the ranking and you see Clemson at the top of a ranking like that, to your point, Jordan, you do have to seize the moment. And it's not, I'm never going to come out here and be like national championship or bust. Okay. Because I just feel like that is an unrealistic expectation to start a season with. Right. But I do feel like if Clemson is really going to get the momentum continue to move back in the right direction, like they did a season ago, returning to the playoffs and, not winning a game in the playoffs, but they were competitive. They did look like they belonged in the playoff, right? They didn't just get blown off the field. Texas didn't just look like this team that was just head and shoulders above them. Clemson doesn't belong on the same football field as them, right? Even though, Texas did their thing, right? They won the game. Clemson kind of made it a little bit interesting towards the end, but really Texas was mostly in control of that game. But Clemson, like we said going into that playoff, they have to look like they belong, and they did, right? So last season was a big stepping stone, especially offensively. You remember the conversation talking about Clemson heading into last season. Clemson's got no wide receivers. Cade Klubnik's a turnover machine. He's a terrible quarterback. They should move on. They should go get a transfer portal quarterback to replace Cade Klubnik. Dabo Sweeney, the game has passed him by. You can go on and on and on and on and on with all the narratives. And Clemson did a lot last year to quail or to kind of curb some of those narratives, but not completely, right? You still lose 3 games. You still lose 3 of your toughest games in the regular season. Unacceptable, right? You open up with a blowout loss to Georgia. You lose inexplicably to a Louisville team at home at night in Death Valley. And then you book in the season with another loss to an SEC team in South Carolina, which you should not have lost that game either. So there are some still narratives out there that Clemson needs to, overcome. They got to beat an SEC team, right? Now they're going to get a crack game 1 against LSU, right? So that's going to be a big thing. But when you're looking at the returning production for this Clemson Tiger team, it tells you that 2025 is a year that they should be able to make a run to the playoffs. They should be able to make a run, compete for that ACC championship, hopefully win that ACC championship game. And then let's see what this team can do in the playoffs. Jordan mentioned it before, 86% of the offense is returning for 2025. 86% of the offense is returning. That's a massive number. Good for first overall in the country. That's huge. 75% of production on the defensive side of the ball is returning. That's good for 7th in the country. So it really does, in the new world of college football, where it's hard to keep depth year in and year out. If guys aren't getting significant playing time, they're looking to jump ship and for a new opportunity and to get paid from another university. That's just the name of the game that we're in the current world of college football. So it's really hard to keep quality depth around in the new age of college football, but somehow Clemson has been able to do it. And now you have this kind of, I don't want to say culminating kind of year of 2025, but you have a big year. You have a lot of proven veteran production on this team, highlighted by your quarterback, Cade Klubnik, who threw 40 touchdowns last year. So this truly is the year where Clemson needs to turn that corner and start climbing back up that mountain and start putting themselves back in the conversation of college football's biggest, best programs. And it starts in 2025. This has got to be a year where Clemson goes out and dominates the ACC, gets themselves another ACC championship game, returns to the playoff, and then we'll see what happens. I'm not going to come out here and say national championship or bust, but I do think Clemson should play for and win the ACC championship game and then go to the playoffs, and we'll see how it shakes out after that. We don't know what the rest of the teams in college football look like right now, but I feel like, honestly, here today, way too early expectations for the 2025 Clemson team for me is ACC champions. I feel like that is, like, at a minimum, that's where this team needs to end come December of 2025. They need to be hoisting another ACC championship trophy and looking to the playoffs.
Yeah, 100%. I think, honestly, I could go a step further. I think this team absolutely should expect to at least, win a playoff game.
Yes.
If you're in it, and
yeah.
I think ultimately, if you're in the position that you are where you're winning the ACC championship, you need to be a top 4 seed.
You better be.
I don't think you can be you can't have a season like you did this year.
No,
I don't think that would be the standard. Where you won the ACC, but you were the 12th team in, and
right.
obviously you had to play Texas in the first round, and obviously the seeding still has its own issues. So it's not a perfect system, but ultimately I think this team absolutely has the potential to make a run. But you need to win the ACC championship. That's got to be priority number one. I think you need to win your opener. Just not for the season has to be the season it revolves around this opener against LSU, but for the momentum of the season, for the
Yeah,
perception of the program, it's going to be a massive recruiting. It's going to be a massive recruiting tool for Clemson.
Clemson has
You
to
need to
win
win
that
that
game.
game,
Yeah, they have to.
and then you need to win you got I think 7-1 in conference play, 6-2, 7-1 I think in conference play.
7-1. Yeah,
I think should be the expectation.
I think you can afford to
Um,
drop a game. It's hard to
and
sit
then
there and go out there and be like, you got to win every single game. You can't, drop the ball once. But yeah, 7-1, and you have to win that LSU game. It's just like you have to win that game. You have to get the SEC monkey off your back. You got to prove um, that you're back to beating at least towards the top level SEC teams, right? You lost to all three SEC teams you played last year. That's a fair narrative that is out there about Clemson. I mean, I know it doesn't make me happy as a Clemson fan to have to swallow that, but it's true. You lost to all the SEC teams you played last year. I mean, so they have to win that LSU game. That is an extremely important game, not because of the whole argument of the Death Valley this, Death Valley that. That's fun to do as fans, and that's fun to do with the trash talk. Um, but yeah, Jordan, to your point, for the national narrative around Clemson to start changing, they 1,000% have to win that open.
yeah, it's important, and this and you touched on it. The narratives about the SEC, the narratives about Clemson, all of those. Yeah. I know they ultimately don't matter as far as what this team is capable of, but for the perception, it does. For off the field, in terms of recruiting, that kind of stuff does matter, and I think and momentum does exist. Throughout a season, you can get things going. You can string some wins together. But obviously, it's not a make or break. But I think Clemson they need to treat it as such, and I think the
Yeah,
preparation this offseason, all of that is going to be building up towards that LSU game. Because they have a lot of they were fairly high up there on the returning production metric as well,
yeah,
and they brought in a lot of transfers that are factored into that as well. But that still matters, and they're a talented, extremely talented football team. Brian Kelly is a good coach. I still believe he's a good coach, but he has his own shortcomings as far as running a program to the degree that they would need to be a national championship contender. But you're facing another Heisman candidate at quarterback, a retooled defense. They have some talent at the skill positions. They have to replace their two tackles, but still a very, very talented football team coming into your stadium. You gotta quell that narrative, and so
absolutely.
um, and you can't afford to lose to South Carolina, and you need, and also you can't lose to South Carolina. You
No,
can't.
no,
Um,
no. I know.
you,
I know it's on
you
the
got to go
road.
into Williams-Brice. You got to
Yeah,
win that game.
yeah. I know it's on the road, but it doesn't matter. Clemson cannot lose that game. You can't book in your season again with SEC losses. You can't have a repeat of that, right? So you have to win those two games. You got to go at least 7-1 in the conference. Go to the conference championship, win that, and to your point, win a playoff game. I mean, this 2025 team with the amount of veteran returning production that you have, senior guys on the team, guys that have been around for a while, guys that know this program in and out, ultra talented guys. Because you look to if you look to the 2026 season, it's not that Clemson's going to fall off a cliff, but you're going to lose a lot at the end of the 2025 season. You're going to lose a ton. So you got to seize the moment while it's here. And that moment is 2025 for the Clemson Tigers. They really have to capitalize on a huge opportunity that they have. They have an opportunity to go out there and prove the nation wrong. They have an opportunity to start reversing a lot of these narratives that are around Clemson about how their best behind them. They're no longer a program that can legitimately compete for a national championship. Dabo's kind of let modern day college football pass them by. They don't use the transfer portal. They don't this, they don't that, right? You can really go a long way in kind of reversing a lot of these narratives. And it starts week 1 against LSU. And then, it'll end with whatever Clemson is able to do in the college football playoff. So it's big opportunity for the Tigers. And, every single Clemson fan out there should have very high expectations this year. And I don't think that is unrealistic of any Clemson fan to think or expect.